What's up, guys? Ace Chapman here, and today we are going to talk about Kmart. Now, what's funny is I know some of my younger folks that watch the videos have never heard of Kmart. Some of you, if you have heard of it, probably have never been to a Kmart. I, on the other hand, I was definitely sporting Kmart back in the day. I went to school and I had all my school clothes from Kmart. We had one up the street from my house. I was busting out in the Hikeys. Some of you guys have never had the good fortune of wearing a good pair of hikes. It was basically a brand that was sold out of Kmart, where instead of Nike, they turned the N into an H. But all the kids at school knew those were not Nikes. They did not look like Nikes at all. So I had to learn how to fight because I wasn't letting anybody make fun of my hikes. So that was Kmart. So I'm gonna show my age a little bit today and talk to you guys about Kmart. Speaking of which, it was on a flight and this girl sits down and we're talking. Turns out she has 800,000 followers on Instagram. And we're kind of chatting. And, she asked me how old I was, which, I would never ask her. But she asked me how old I was. And I'm like, oh, take a guess. What do you think? And I guess she didn't get the memo that you're always supposed to underguess the age. But she's like 41. I'm like 41, like really 41? I'm 38. It'll be 39 about 6 months, about 18 months from 40. But most people will, even if they're just being nice, they'll guess under 38. She's like 41. And I just look at her, I'm just like, are you serious right now? So it made me feel a little bit old, but regardless, we're going to jump into Kmart. I digress. So let's chat about Kmart. Now, at one point, despite the fact that, they filed bankruptcy, they had so many issues, they were the Goliath of the industry. And guess who David was? David was Walmart. Walmart was this little upstart. Kmart felt like, these guys, they cannot be a threat. And one of the things that Kmart knew, it was known, whether it was Sears, Woolworth, everybody knew that discount stores couldn't make it in towns of less than 100,000. And ideally, you want it to be 500,000 or more. And so here was this little upstart. And it would go in these towns and, some of the towns would have a few 100,000, but they would open stores in, towns that had 50,000, 20,000. And Kmart's like, wow, these people are crazy. They're going to run out of money and go out of business. And then as, it continued, Kmart's like, they got smart. They're like, you know what, let's do the research. Maybe they figured out something that goes against the conventional wisdom. And so they did research, came back, no discount store can survive, with the size that these things are. There's just no way that long term this does not work. Well, during this time, something called barcodes came out, it was breaking edge technology. And sometimes when you're talking about history, one of the most important things you can do is put yourself in the mindset of the consumer and put yourself in the mindset of the operators or CEOs of the time. You can't think about things things are obvious when you look at them from today's point of view, but to really get lessons, you've got to try to put yourself in the mindset of the day and time and conventional wisdom. And that's why a lot of times, my most disliked video is when I talk against the conventional wisdom of how to use social media. And, just anytime you're talking against conventional wisdom, it's going to be disliked. But that's where you want to be. You want to figure out what's the conventional wisdom and where is conventional wisdom on. So that at the time was a conventional wisdom that you shouldn't, be in these small towns, that kind of thing. The other thing that was just conventional wisdom is there was new technology called barcoding, and it was amazing. And the way it was sold And the reason it was sold was so that people didn't have to change tags on products. So now, like, it's like when I want to change a price, I can just go into the computer and change it, and it's going to go to that barcode and it'll ring up right and whatever. And I can put up a sign, this is the new price. I don't have to, back in the day, if they wanted to change a price, they had to go to each individual thing, take off the tag, re-tag it. Just an absolute nightmare. Put stickers on each thing. It was a nightmare. And then once it came to the register, that tag, it had to be on there because that was the only way that the clerk knew what the price was. So we just don't even have you can't, like, put yourself and just think, oh, like, this is, you can make decisions based on the way things are today. It was a totally different time. So they had these salesmen that went around, they sold this barcode technology as this way to avoid all the high costs of tag, the work, labor, and now you can across the board make changes to individual products, and everything will ring up based on this barcode technology. Amazing technology at the time. Now, Walton and Walmart saw this technology and they went way deeper than even the people that were the creators of the technology had ever dreamed. And this is kind of another secret lesson in this is how can, if you're sold a certain technology or you're sold a software or, there's a program out there, look how everybody else is using it, but then how can you use it that's something that even the creators didn't dream of, but that's something that nobody else is doing? That's how you get a competitive edge, not regurgitating and doing the same thing that's everybody else is being told to do and trained to do. You're not going to get an edge there by doing what everybody else is doing. And so what Walmart looked at it and said, and they're like, wow, like, we can use this and we can keep track of all the products that are at all our stores. And through this database, we'll track, what's selling, what's not. We can move inventory between stores. We can get more inventory to stores. And now we can basically, they connected to a satellite and fed the information back. And they invested on building on top of this barcode technology what at the time was, again, cutting edge ideas, which today we take for granted, which is supply chain management. That did not exist. It just wasn't a thing. It was like, okay, you're going to send product when the store manager tells you they need more product. The other thing that really didn't exist is it was very smart for a store to have a local manager because they wanted somebody who was local, who knew what the market wanted, who was in touch with the consumers, who built a relationship. And then they gave that person the autonomy to run that store that was in that market that was the right size. Now, the way that Walton and Walmart got around that concept of you can't have a store that will survive in a small market of 50, 40,000 people is that they shifted the whole mindset to we are now running one large store. And they were able to do that through barcode technology. So while the conventional wisdom they were right. The conventional wisdom was right. It's not to say that like, oh, don't pay attention to conventional wisdom because it's wrong. What you want to figure out is where's the hole in conventional wisdom? Where, and today we don't see it, but just because I think one of the things about conventional wisdom is that we see it as an old thing. It's a thing from the past. So like conventional wisdom is things from the past. But today you're operating 90% of what you're doing based on what's going to be conventional wisdom that's old school conventional wisdom in 20 years. People will look back and say, oh, wow, that is not smart. That was conventional wisdom. Somebody made a breakthrough, though that was the next billion, trillion dollar idea, because we're moving to a time now where it's going to be, they're going to be multiple $trillion companies. And those were the holes that were sought. And there's so many things that come to mind. What Steve Jobs did when he came back to Apple 2 months away from this thing filing bankruptcy and all the things that he did that were against the conventional. It had an amazing CEO that did everything right. He was doing everything right and drove that company right into bankruptcy. And it took someone who, at that point, and it's so ridiculous. And what most people aren't open to the things that are against conventional wisdom until it's in a dire straight situation. Like Apple wasn't willing to listen to Steve Jobs until it was like, oh, we're about to go off a cliff. I guess you can be the driver now, Steve. And he still, because he was able to leverage the ideas that were outside of the conventional wisdom, he was able to turn it into what it is now. So when you look at this Walmart versus Kmart story, one of the things that applies to what we do as deal makers is this concept of the network effect. And the network effect, I feel like is something that most people aren't paying attention to. And the honest truth is, even amazing deal makers and an amazing deal maker like Buffett doesn't take full advantage of. So what Walton realized was that we can, like Walmart has all of these individual stores. They're looking at things like individual stores. They look at the income statement, the financial statements of each store, like how's each one doing? Should we close that? Should we do this? Da, 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 da. And the shift that Walmart leveraged the barcode to be able to do is he ran one thing. He ran one store. He ran Walmart like it was one store. And when, more stuff was needed on a shelf over here, it might be that it was a store in Arkansas and another in Nashville, but he would just move things around. Or when a manager was needed over here to work a shift, it was one big store. He looked at the inventory and moved things around based on what was needed. And it allowed him to break that conventional wisdom that no store could last or make it. There just literally weren't enough customers. That's the thing. It wasn't that this was some antiquated idea. The numbers were the numbers. It literally, there just aren't enough customers. Once you get below 200,000 and definitely below 100,000 to sustain, if you're maxing out every customer that's buying those products, it just didn't work. But once you move to this network effect, and leverage the synergy between all these stores. And it's a lot bigger deal. Like, obviously at the end of the day, Kmart, some people really, when they talk about this story, they talk about the fact that Kmart or Walmart had the buying power and all that, but Kmart had more buying power. It wasn't this thing of like just buying power and they're cutting the prices lower and da da da. This is way deeper than that, and it was the shift to running this thing like one big network, looking at the financials as one big network, and making decisions like you're running a single store, a single company. Now, when you look at somebody like Berkshire and what they've done, they've taken a lot of the concepts that we've talked about to grow into what it is today. Being able to snowball income, taking all the capital and reinvesting it into buying more income, buying more cash flow. All free cash flow should be spent buying more cash flow. Doing things where you're buying what's called capital efficient companies, which they're doing less of now, and it's, you're seeing it in the numbers. But a lot of the things that and just this whole general idea of, hey, the most valuable thing you can do is buy a profitable company. So a lot of the concepts that we talk about are based on this whole deal maker thing. Now, one of the things, though, that they haven't done well, that IAC has done an amazing job of, is looking at it like one company. And all of the different assets are figuring out, okay, how are we working all of these together to grow? So when they buy a Match.com or they buy an Expedia, now this has some advertising space. There are a certain number of people that are coming here, and we're going to send some of that traffic to Match. And again, we've got this one really big company that has all these assets, and it's not about breaking them up and trying to see, okay, how much is this one making, how much is that one making. It's how much is the whole thing making. Maybe if we're sending some traffic from Expedia to Match, then Expedia is going to make a little bit less, but we're making more over here. And is that more bigger than this? And more importantly, what's coming to the bottom line? Where is the cash flow, and how do we grow this one big company together? And so every time you do an acquisition, you're basically you're creating more traffic, more customers for the whole company to be leveraged the best way possible. So that's the exciting thing, especially when it comes to us as deal makers. And when you compare that to what Berkshire has done, where the focus, what Warren tells every CEO is, I don't want you trying to reinvest for growth and all of that in the company. If there's something obvious that needs to be taken care of, that's great. But all the profit, we want all the profit to be sent to Berkshire so that we can buy more companies, because he understands the most efficient use of the capital is to buy more companies. But where they're missing it is there are assets that are sitting there that could be leveraged to grow other companies within the portfolio. So that's what we look at when we're buying a company. It's not just, oh, are we buying a company? It's what are the assets in this company that we can leverage to grow other companies, regardless of kind of how good this deal is. We're going to grow the whole company by leveraging these and cross-promoting these assets. So what you could see a Berkshire doing, that, it's not as easy with offline business. You have to get a little more creative. Now, when we're talking about internet businesses, it's really obvious. There's a certain amount of traffic coming in. There's a certain email list. There's social media, and you can do those cross promotions and grow the whole thing. And now that we've got this whole network of business bars all over the world that are doing this together, that aspect starts to snowball. Now, on Berkshire, it takes a little more creativity, but you could see how a Geico is viral and as huge as those commercials are. And they've tied in all kinds of random things into those commercials. One of my favorites is the Cabbage Patch doll commercial, just because I had a Cabbage Patch doll when I was a kid. It was like nostalgia. It's just brilliant. And so you can see them taking, just like they did the Cabbage Patch, was, Berkshire doesn't own. You can see them doing something that ties in a See's Candy brand, or maybe it's that's a part of it. Maybe it's just makes an appearance in those commercials, and they make even fun of it. As See's Candy, that would be an explosion to See's Candy. But the idea and the way that Berkshire is built is just, hey, we just want to get cash flow. We're buying the cash flow. We're going to take that cash flow and reinvest it. And honestly, hey, it's worked. So it's not to say that anything's done wrong. But I do think that, in this last decade, Berkshire has gone from this thing that's like always double-digit returns to last decade. It's just been single-digit returns for the last 10 years. So I think that would be one of those things that could take it to the next level. But, like I said, who am I? It's incredible work. But for you guys as deal makers, I think that adding those two things, like really going hardcore, where the real focus is taking cash flow and growing the bottom line by just buying more assets. That should be the number one goal. But I think secondarily, you can look at the IAC model and start to see, all right, how do I look at this thing as one company, look at the financials as one company, look at how the balance sheet, everything is just one company, not a bunch of little companies. It's everything should be working together. And then what does this bottom line look like, as opposed to worrying, okay, we've got this store. And that's the shift that Sam Walton had to make that Kmart couldn't. Kmart would say, oh, we're going to get rid of this business or this store because it's not making money. Whereas Sam would say, hey, it's just about the network. I don't really care. Like, this store isn't making money. It's really losing money. But he didn't care about that because it was about this one big thing. And I think if you combine that with the Berkshire method of getting aggressive and constantly buying those assets to leverage, that's when things get really exciting, guys. Thanks so much for checking out the video. This was a little detailed. Let me know what you think in the comments. Was this a valuable video for you? Be sure to subscribe, like it if you got something out of it, and I'll see you on the next video.